Thank you for agreeing to do this interview, Adela. For documentation purposes, let me just say that today is April 13th, 2023. We're on the campus of the University of Notre Dame, and this is part of the Letras Latinas Oral History Project. So will you, again, for documentation purposes, just tell us your name, your date of birth, where you were born, and where you grew up.
Okay, all right. So I'm Adela Najarro, and I was born on October 19th, and I grew up in California. I was born in San Francisco, and then at age 4, we moved to the Los Angeles area, and then I lived around in many different places in the Los Angeles area.
Can you tell us a little about your family background?
So, all of my family is from Nicaragua, and my mother and father met in San Francisco in their 20s. And so I could have been born in Nicaragua, but I was born in San Francisco, and in St. Luke's Hospital. And I was baptized in, it's not St. Joseph. No, it is St. Joseph's. And on a church on Mission Street. And I was raised there.
So both mother and father were born in Nicaragua?
Yes, and they both immigrated to San Francisco.
And they met in San Francisco?
And they met in San Francisco, yeah.
Okay, all right. And then their siblings are also from Nicaragua?
Yeah, everybody. So the only, in my family, the people born in the United States are half of my cousins. So half of my cousins were born in Nicaragua. All of the aunts and uncles on both sides were born in Nicaragua.
How old were you when your family relocated to Southern California?
I was about 4 years old.
Okay, so from ages 0 to 4, San Francisco, and
Yes.
then after that,
Yeah.
let's call it Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, and then I would visit, my parents were not married, and my mom's probably not going to like that. But anyway, so what happened though, my father was in my life, was with us my whole life, and so I would go visit him every year.
In San Francisco?
In San Francisco. And so I have a lot of memories of being in San Francisco in the springtime.
What neighborhood did your father live in?
Well, let me see, what is, Dolores Street. So right in between Castro, in between the Castro district and the Mission district on Dolores Street.
So Dolores and 18th, Dolores and 17th?
I think in the 20s.
Okay.
I think Dolores in the 20s.
So in other words, you were born in Nicaragua, then you relocated...
No, I was born here.
Sorry, you were born in San Francisco, then you relocated to Southern California with your mom.
Yes.
And then you would come back to San Francisco to visit your dad.
Yes.
So you were sort of having you were going back and forth between Southern California and Northern California.
Yes.
Because of your family circumstances.
Yes, and I remember being a little girl and flying alone on the plane. And I really loved that. That was such an adventure to be.
So your mom, obviously your mother was fine with putting you on the plane to go visit your dad.
Yeah, my mom always spoke well of my father, and that's my family, and I love both sides of my family.
So where in Southern California did you grow up? Let's say from age 4 to 10, where in Southern California were you?
So one of the things with my families, with my mom, is that we moved a lot.
Okay.
She would just pick up and move whenever. That was one of her prime solutions to problems is, okay, we're moving. And I remember one time in 3rd grade, we were doing a lesson on math and charts, bar charts. Mm-hmm. And I know the teacher wanted to get data from the class. So she asked everybody, how many times have you moved? And so on one side it was 1, 2, 3, and then she was going to do the bar chart with the answers from the class. And then when she got to me, it was like 12. And so then she was like, oh my dear, well, that's a lot. And so then she had to explain how there are anomalous data points in a set. Anyway, it's funny.
So in your household, when you moved to Southern California with your mother, it was you, your mom, and some siblings?
Yeah, my brother Salvador.
Okay.
So I have one brother, Salvador.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So your brother Salvador, your mother and father had 2 kids together.
Yes.
You and Salvador.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned school. You mentioned 3rd grade. Were you a reader? Tell me. Share with us your relationship, your incipient, your early relationship with books and reading?
So I think that's the foundation of my issue with language. So because my mother worked, so when we were in San Francisco, I went to preschool at age 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in preschool, I seem to remember picking up books. My mom tells a story that I did know how to read like under the age of 5. So I learned Spanish first, but because I went to preschool so early, I learned English. And then in the preschool, they had books. And I do remember a story that it all, when you're little, it all gets jumbled.
Yeah.
So when I was around 7 years old in Los Angeles with my tío Ernesto, we went to the library because I had checked out so many books, but we hadn't returned any of them. And so we went to the library with the returned books, and then there were also books we had bought, so we were trying to barter the fees. Would you take these children's books that we bought and the late books that we never returned and get rid of the fees? So I was reading so much when I was a little girl, and I would be mesmerized and just read for hours and hours. I just loved reading.
So was Tío Ernesto your mother's brother?
Yes, Tío Ernesto.
So you have memories of him taking you to the library?
Yes.
So it sounds like perhaps, was he maybe a father figure in a way in Southern California?
Yes, he was. And so my mom's side of the family, she's one of 8, and there are 6 brothers and 6 males and 2 women. My mom and my tia Tere, and then the 5 uncles. And the reason we moved to Los Angeles is that they had all moved to Los Angeles, so we followed them to Los Angeles.
Okay.
So then it became my mother's side of the family was in the Los Angeles area. My father's side of the family stayed in San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you have a relationship with your extended family on your father's side of the family?
Yes. So my father has two sisters, so I have 2 aunts, and they have many children, many cousins. So the family is huge in terms of the aunts and uncles having children.
So when do you have knowledge of when your family on both sides, which family members first came to San Francisco from Nicaragua and when?
It was the grandmothers. Both grandmothers came to San Francisco and left their children in Nicaragua.
And are we talking like 1940s, 1950s? When the grandmothers...
Probably the 40s, maybe early 50s.
So the grandmothers made the journey from San Francisco.
And it's really important that they both, my father and my mother, were left in Nicaragua with relatives. And even though the relatives took care of them, they both, I know that there's these huge fissures in their hearts because of that childhood trauma.
But your grandmother, so 2 women came to San Francisco on their own, or with them?
As far as I can tell, yes.
What did they do in San Francisco?
So let me see. What did Lela do? I'm not sure what my grandmother on my dad's side did. I think she worked in factories, that kind of thing. My mom's mother, Abuelita Minta, she had a restaurant for a while. Then she had a boarding house. So you know how big the houses are in San Francisco?
Yeah.
So what she'd do is she'd rent out the rooms. Those types. So they made it on their own businesses. They were independent businesswomen, both of them. And then my father started making money by buying properties and refurbishing them and selling them. And I think that helped out with Lela, his mother.
Okay.
That's how they did the finances.
So, you mentioned in an earlier conversation, so we'll bring it out here, that you went to Nicaragua for the first time when you were 14.
Yeah.
Share with us a little bit the circumstances of that visit.
So my mom's side of the family never returned to Nicaragua, except for Tío Francisco. He returned when he was in his late 80s and passed in Nicaragua.
Okay.
But no one on my mother's side went to Nicaragua. Well, some of my cousins do. They go for vacations, they go back and things. But my mom especially was like, ya me fui de ese país. She's done with that country. She's not going to go back there. And she came here to the United States to make her life here in the United States.
So just so we get the timeline, do you know the year when your mother came to the U.S.? Was it talking the 60s?
Well, my brother was born in 58.
Oh, okay.
So then if I go back 10 years, that would be 48, 50s. So I guess my grandmother had to come earlier then.
Okay.
I was wrong with the dates because my
So
brother's
your mom
birthdays.
migrated to San Francisco when in like the late 40s, early 50s.
Probably,
Okay.
yeah. But I know she was an adult. She was in her early 20s when she came.
Okay.
She was not a child.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would have been a time when Somoza Dynasty would have been in place then.
Oh, yes.
And so
going really
so
well.
when I hear you say I left that country, I'm never going back, I detect perhaps some discord on your mother's part.
Yeah, well, she, in my writing, I've had to think about this and analyze it. And I really think that what my mother did is that she did not have opportunities in Nicaragua. She had to get married. That would have been her option. And she didn't want that. She wanted more. She wanted an independent life. She wanted to build her own life. She's always made businesses. She came here and she got a beauty school license, then she became a beauty school teacher, then she ended up her career as a state examiner for the state of California for beauty licenses, cosmetology licenses. So it's amazing what she has accomplished
So
on
it
her
sounds
own.
like what you're saying then, that she viewed as a woman that she would have more possibilities in the U.S. than remaining in Nicaragua.
Yeah.
And then when she came to San Francisco,
So I have to tell you the story.
Yeah.
So the story is pretty good because the ticket my abuelita sent was for her sister, because her sister was older. But her sister was in love with her husband, or who would become her husband. So my mom took the ticket. So my mom was the youngest of 8, and she's like, I'm going to the United States.
so how much time transpired from the time your mother arrived in San Francisco to when she met your father?
No, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe 5 years, 4 years.
Okay.
Something
so
like that.
she was a single woman for about 5 years, and then she met your dad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's transition back to the writing. So you were an avid reader as a child.
Yes.
When did you begin putting pen to paper? What memories do you have about beginning to sort of scribble and start to...
Right, so they combine, right? The writing and the reading combine. And so it was, I think it was 3rd grade. Yeah, it was 3rd grade. Maybe it was 4th grade. So we had a contest, a poetry contest.
Okay.
And so I wrote limericks for the poetry contest. And so we turned it in, and then the teacher announced the winner. And the winner was this other little girl.
Okay.
And she read the little girl's limericks. Except I had read all the limericks in the library, and I knew that the little girl had copied the limericks from a book in the library. And I had written my own limericks, right? So I should have won, you know? So I remember, I did go up to the teacher and complain. I know I did that, but I don't have a memory of what she did. So she must have settled it in an amicable way.
So how did you get, why were you writing limericks and not like a little short story?
I don't know.
Do you
I
have
loved
do you have memories
limericks.
of someone reading you nursery rhymes, or?
No. Do I remember people reading to me as a child? No.
Okay.
No, I don't. But later on, when I'm, when I got a divorce, I was living in Los Angeles. I got a divorce, and I moved back to San Francisco. So I reconnected with my father's side of the family. And I went to an Easter celebration. And there was, I think, a great uncle. So it was an Easter celebration. Everybody was all dressed up, buffet, in somebody's home. And everyone stopped, and my uncle recited poetry.
Your father's brother?
No, he was a great uncle. So my father's uncle.
Okay.
Right, my father's uncle, recited poetry, and everybody in the house sat down and stopped and listened and applauded and thought it was amazing. And now you remind me, my mom had Federico Garcia Lorca's book of poems by her bedstand. So there must have been reading in my home with the poems and all that, because I remember the book, and I remember looking at the book as a child.
Okay. Did you go to high school in Los Angeles or San Francisco?
Los Angeles.
Okay.
Los
And then
Angeles.
where did you go? Where did you go after high school?
What do you mean for college? Oh, University of Redlands in Southern California.
Oh.
Yeah.
Which is a small private school.
A small private school, like 2,000 students.
Why did you end up there? How'd you end up there?
The narrative of my life is this is my mom. We came to the United States in order to make a better life, and you have to go to college and take advantage of these opportunities. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to college. I'm going to college. I'm going to college.
But why not UCLA?
Because personally, I was afraid of large schools. I did not want to sit in a classroom of 300 people.
Okay.
And I totally made the right decision because at University of Redlands, when I went in the 80s, I had classes of 8 to 12. My largest class was a genetics class, which had 23 students in it.
Okay.
And I had one-on-one teaching for 4 years. It was amazing.
So, did you have any writing classes at Redlands?
Yes. So here's the story. So high school, I graduated. I think I was a B student in high school, and I got accepted to all the colleges I applied to. I only applied to small liberal arts colleges because that's what I decided I wanted to do.
Okay.
I wanted to live on campus in a dorm. I wanted to have the full small college nurturing experience. So I got accepted to all of them. I was great. I visited them, chose Redlands. So I'm going to Redlands, and I'm loving the campus, and I'm in my first class with Ralph Angel.
You studied with Ralph Angel?
Yes, and so he's teaching world literature. And we're reading Crime and Punishment and also 100 Years of Solitude. And those are the two I remember
This would
from
have
the
been
class.
1980 what?
Probably 81.
Okay.
I graduated in 1980, so 81. And so I'm loving this class, and I'm reading these books, and I'm like, because I read it my whole life, so I'm growing. I turn in my papers, and I get C minuses and Ds.
From Ralph Angel?
From Ralph Angel. I'm like, what? And so this was a small college, and we all went to office hours. So I went to office hours. I'm like, what is going on here? And so he's talking to me, and he's like, well, what? And so I start talking my ideas about the book, blah, 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 blah. And so then he's like, those are really great ideas, but they're not in your paper. And so he reads my paper, and he's like, reads it out loud and shows me that what I had said was not on the page. So then I ended up taking all the composition courses because I needed to learn how to write a college level paper. And in doing so, I had all these English credits. And also I loved Ralph. So of course I took his creative writing classes.
So you were aware that he was a poet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I took all his creative writing classes. And I was an economics major at the time because I was going to be a lawyer.
Okay.
I was going to be a lawyer. And I loved economics. Economics was good, but the faculty there was not that large, and Ralph was amazing.
let me steer us a little bit. So,
Okay.
I'm hearing you're at Redlands, you're thinking about economics in law school, but you're taking writing classes
Yes.
with Ralph Angel, poet.
Yes.
At what point did you think, oh, this poetry thing I like more? I mean,
Well, see, my identity, I was always a poet. So 4th grade, I'm writing limericks and reading
Okay,
poetry.
okay.
High school, I took a creative writing class, and I walk in, and the teacher had put my poem on the walls.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is that poetry was just something that was always going to be with you, but it wasn't going to be a career path. You were going to
Right.
be a lawyer or something. Okay.
Right, so no, that's exactly true. So even with Ralph's class, the Redlands Review, I have it in a box in my closet at home, and my first publication is about a poem where I'm writing about my mom working in a factory and her hands burning as she's doing hot cross buns, and how she doesn't want to work in this factory. So what I write about today, I wrote about in that very first
Was
published
Ralph
poem.
Angel a mentor of sorts?
Oh yeah, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. Yes.
And did you read his work?
I had to have. Yes. He introduced me to Elizabeth Bishop. So my first book where I loved poetry. I mean, I'm misstating my own story because I've always loved poetry. But I remember reading Elizabeth Bishop's North South, and so the actual book, and falling in love with the poem From March, or To March. And it's a poem about walking on the beach. And because I was raised in Southern California, always by the beaches, it's just that poem was amazing to me, and I just fell in love with it.
So who are some of the poets that Ralph Angel exposed you to in addition to Elizabeth Bishop?
Now I'm going to forget. James McMillan, I think.
Okay.
It was he wrote a long poem, and but now I forget. The one who stuck with me is Elizabeth Bishop.
So you took writing workshops with Ralph Angel? Okay.
And my degree in Redlands was as a English writing major.
Okay. And then, of course, to my knowledge, you have an MFA from Vermont.
Vermont College,
Vermont
yes.
College, and then a PhD from Western Michigan. So
Yes.
where did those two degrees come in? After Redlands, did you take a break from writing?
So my identity as a writer was part of me as always, but it wasn't a career. So when I left Redlands, I was going to try to get a job as a writer. So I was going to write for magazines, nonfiction, advertising. I did internships, all those types of things. And this was when you mailed before email became, gosh, am I that old? Okay, yeah. So I remember mailing a query letter for any kind of job position to every single magazine in Los Angeles County, which there are a lot. 0 responses.
Okay.
0. So then I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And on the news at the time, there was a shortage of teachers, and they kept on saying, where's the shortage of teachers? We need you to do this. So I went down to the LA Unified School District offices to get information. And my whole jobs through college were summer camps with children, working with children through the YMCA. So I walk into LA Unified School District saying, hey, I heard this ad on the radio that you need teachers. What's going on? I went for information. I was wearing jeans and a shirt, I was not like interview ready. Yeah. And they talked with me, and then they were like, oh, well, we're doing exams right now to test people's bilingual abilities. Would you like to take it? And I went, oh, sure, why not? So, of course, I passed it, right? And then they're like, oh, well, we have some principals who are conducting interviews. Would you like to have an interview? And I went, oh, okay, sure. And they hired me on the spot.
So they asked you, how did they know that you were bilingual?
I told them, the ad must have asked for bilingual.
Okay, let me do a little parenthesis here.
Okay.
It's something I forgot to mention, so let's get this out of the way.
Okay.
So speak to me a little bit about your relationship with Spanish growing up in your household. For example, did your mother and father speak to you in Spanish, English, combination of both?
Well, what's hilarious is whenever I speak Spanish to anybody, they always say that I have a Nicaraguan accent. And that's because in San Francisco, we were all Nicaraguan. So all of my family and friends, extended family, were Nicaraguan. So every single time I spoke Spanish, I only spoke Spanish from 0 to high school. I only spoke Spanish with Nicaraguan people.
What language did you speak with your brother?
So all the cousins and my brother is Spanglish.
Okay.
And as we got older, it went more and more English.
Okay.
But the formative years, home was Spanish.
Did you ever, or have you ever studied the language formally?
Sort of, little bit here and there, classes here and there, but I don't have a degree in it, or not even a minor or anything.
But you can read it. You can read it.
Yes.
Okay, but you don't have extensive experience writing in Spanish.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So you got a job as a school teacher.
Yes. So that's what I did
grade
after college.
What grade level?
K through 3. And basically I worked with the kindergartners, and first grade was the most.
And how long did you do that?
13 years. 13 years.
So you worked as a school teacher for 13 years.
Yes.
And then you decided to go to grad school in creative writing?
Yes, I got, so I was writing poems the whole time, and I got a divorce. Again, the divorce is a major milestone in my life.
Okay.
And so I was in LA, I moved to San Francisco, and I was still teaching bilingual education, kindergarten, first grade, and I was writing like crazy. In San Francisco, there's open mics, and I was going to 2 to, I don't even know how I did it.
So now we're talking the 90s?
No, I'm not sure. It's when I was in my 30s. So I got a divorce so I met my ex-husband when I was 21, and I divorced when I was 31. So this is when I was about 31.
And so that...
Do we have to do the years? That'd be
well, I'm trying to, because, okay, so...
You want to find out if you were in the area.
Well, okay, I graduated from high school in 1984, and then I went to UC Berkeley in the fall of 1984, and so I was studying at UC Berkeley poetry in the mid to late 80s, and I'm trying to sense...
So no, I was not there. I was in Los Angeles. That's probably when I was married.
Okay.
That's probably the
So
years
you
I was
began
married.
doing open mics, let's say late 80s and beyond.
Probably later than that.
Okay, all right.
Later,
So,
that feels later
let's
than
get back
that.
to, so you began doing open mics, and then what?
Right, and so I was elementary school teacher full time, going at night to open mics 2, 3, 4 times a night.
In San Francisco?
In San Francisco.
What neighborhoods? Where?
The Lower Haight International Cafe.
Okay.
That's the one I remember most because Norman was
you were
there.
part of the spoken word scene
Yeah.
in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Let's call it early 90s. Okay.
Yeah, and that at that time I was also pursuing a master's in instructional technologies because I thought that I could change my education background into making computer programs for children.
Okay.
So I was going to a master's program, full-time teaching, and going to open mics 3 or 4 times a week. And the poems won. So I did not finish the master's in
So at some point you thought, you know what, if I want to do more graduate work, it's in creative writing that I should be doing it. Is that what happened?
Sort of. Okay, so I like making fun of myself. So I wrote Ralph Angel a letter in marker.
Okay.
On top of my grandmother's washing machine. And I must have included a poem or something. And Ralph wrote back.
What did you ask him in the letter?
Probably, here I'm writing poems again, what do you think? What should I do?
Okay,
Right?
all right.
And he just wrote back and he said, hi, how are you doing? I'm so glad to hear. And we reconnected. And it was through Ralph that I learned about, I didn't know master's programs existed.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I did because I got the instructional technologies, but I thought for a job, right? Oh,
Yeah.
master's programs exist for jobs.
Yeah. So what did Ralph say?
So he said, so I was writing and sending him poems, and he was writing me back, and I think we connected talking on the phone, and he suggested that I go to the master's program at Vermont College.
Okay.
He was teaching in that program, and so he said, you should consider an MFA, and so I did.
So what I'm finding interesting about this story is that you had him as a creative writing teacher as an undergrad, but he did not say you should do an MFA.
He might have when I was an undergrad. Maybe I didn't hear it. I have friends in the same cohort who did go. One friend went to NYU for an MFA.
Right out of Fedlands.
Yeah. So I don't know if I just didn't hear it or if I didn't understand it or if it was, that I didn't understand how the higher educational system worked in the United States.
Okay.
And I had no one to tell me.
Okay.
No reinforcement at home.
So he suggested Vermont College because he taught in that.
It was a low residency program.
Okay. And he taught in it.
So
he became your teacher in the low residency program.
No, I never worked with him at Vermont.
Who did you work with in Vermont?
Richard Jackson, Mark Cox, David Wojan, and he was beautiful. Now I'm forgetting his name. He passed away. Oh, and he's such a beautiful soul. So so one of the things I did is because my divorce was due to abuse. It was an abusive marriage. And leaving that marriage, I did not want to be hateful or resentful or backlash against men.
Okay.
So one of the things I did is I got myself male cats because I had to have positive male energy in my life.
Okay.
And I have had male cats my entire life.
All right.
Okay. And then at Vermont, I insisted on working with men because I wanted to not be put down by masculinity and to be equal to men. That was an impetus at that time, and I did that on purpose.
So were there any of your instructors at Vermont College stand out as who were useful to you as you're developing?
Well, they all were.
They all were.
They all were. They all were. So they all. And one of the beautiful things about Vermont is that you work for 6 months one-on-one with an instructor, and you send them a packet of work once a month.
Yeah.
But then they have a 2-week residency where you have a workshop.
Yeah.
And in the workshop, there were women teachers in the workshops and things like Mary Ruffel. And I'm sorry, I forget names. And so many people.
Did you study with Mary Ruffel?
In the workshop, yeah, and then also in the PhD, and
We'll get to the PhD in a minute. But
yeah. So that program, Vermont, was so rich because you get that one-on-one over 6 months, and then at the residency you get more teachers through the workshop, through the lectures, through the students. It was a very powerful program.
On balance, was your MFA experience at Vermont College a positive one?
Oh my goodness, yes. So I was teaching full time while doing that, while going to the open mics. So I look back on myself, I'm like, how did you do that?
So how did the experience of now going into some formal training, i.e. the MFA program, how did that change or influence from your open mic work?
Oh, right. So I had to come to before I went to the MFA, I had to make a decision of if I wanted to become a performance poet or a poet focused on the page. And I just did some interior work on myself to figure out what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to be a performance poet.
Okay.
I didn't want to develop that part of the art. That was just like
Why is it?
Well, I just like to stand on stage and perform and to work on my performance.
The reader in you sort of took over in that point, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose. I was just like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be out in front performing every single time I do my poems. And instead I wanted to focus on the page, on the poem, on the page.
Okay.
And I like that. I think, it had to be the reader because I've always felt that when I'm reading, I am connecting with the authors. So if I was writing, then I could connect with the world. And I think that's what I went that way.
Talk to me about your decision to then, and the timeline, to then go on to pursue the PhD at Western Michigan.
So the MFA was so amazing and so powerful and so wonderful. I mean, I just loved it. I loved it, reading and writing and reading and writing and talking about writing and reading and poetry. Oh, it was amazing. And I was like, I need to do this. I'm going to do this full time. And so I needed to change. Elementary school teaching, and I always taught bilingual education. I taught in poverty districts. It was very, very challenging, very, very beautiful work, but exhausting. I would come home after teaching and sleep for 2.5 hours.
Okay.
And this is when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
It was that draining because I think I had 36-year-olds. And I am a very loving person, and so all day long I was putting out my love to 30 little human beings. And I did that for 13 years.
That was exhausting. So
I needed to change. Okay. So I decided to change my life, and I applied to the Stegner at Stanford. I applied to Provincetown, and I applied to the PhD program at Western Michigan.
Why Western Michigan?
Because 2 of my professors at Vermont taught there, and I knew that I could work with them. Nancy Eimers and Bill Olson. So I knew that they're the nicest, kindest, most beautiful people, and their poetry is amazing. And I knew it was like, okay, if I'm going to go live somewhere and interact with somebody about my poems for 4 to 5 years, I better like them.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was guaranteed that I liked them, so it was okay. And then I just rolled the dice. It's like wherever I get accepted, that's where I'm going.
So Stegner, Provincetown, Western Michigan.
Right. And so I didn't get the Stegner, I didn't get Provincetown, but I got Western. Okay. And so I packed up and moved and went. Yeah.
And so, but then talk to me a little about where Herb Scott came into the picture as a mentor.
Oh, well, he was amazing. He was my dissertation director, and unfortunately he passed a year and a half before I finished. He got cancer a year and a half before I finished, and then he passed before I finished. So Nancy and Bill took over his
press.
They took over, I think they took over his press, but as my dissertation advisors, he was my advisor, and then Nancy and Bill took over.
But wasn't there a press out of Western Michigan?
Wasn't there what?
A press.
Yes, Third Coast.
Yeah.
Or New Issues. Third Coast is their magazine.
So New Issues was Herb Scott's baby? Or, okay, and then they took it over after he died, or it just folded after he died?
No, it's still going.
Okay.
So they took it over.
Okay.
Or it continues as part of the graduate studies program at Western Michigan University.
Getting back to, for documentation purposes, what years were you at Western Michigan?
Oh my goodness.
We're talking like the early 2000s?
Okay, so I got my job at Cabrillo in 2005. I worked in Wisconsin the year before that. So I must have graduated in 2002. Took me 5 years. So late
90s.
So late 90s,
okay.
early, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. And during your years at Western Michigan, that's where you met Meta.
Yes, Metasema, yeah.
Who else was there with you?
Jamie D'Agostino, my Kirsten Hemme, Carrie McGath, who I'm going to see this weekend, Rachel Levine, and you may not have heard of them, but they're beautiful poets and writers, and we're all doing this work.
Now's the time to tell the origin story of how we know each other. Let me give you my version, and then you're going to add to it. Okay.
All right.
So, in the summer of 2004, I was putting together my proposal for the wind shifts for U of A. And my recollection is that you got on my radar. I don't remember the details, so you'll fill that part in, because it's about Valerie Sayers. Somehow, Valerie Sayers put you on my radar. I don't remember how, but her I remember she was involved.
Yeah.
And I had this memory that maybe some of your work appeared in the Notre Dame Review. And then I guess I just got in touch with you at some point and told you that I was doing this anthology.
So I think it was way before the anthology that we met. It was at the end of my graduate program. So the traditional trajectory of getting a PhD, you take your courses the first years, and then you write your dissertation. As you're writing your dissertation, you go to conferences and workshops, and you try to build out your CV and get those experiences. So part of that is I applied to a Catholic Writers Conference at St. John University, I think it's St. John University, and in New York. And Valerie Sayers was the fiction instructor. And I'm not sure, I know, my dissertation combines creative nonfiction, critical analysis, and poetry. Okay. So I did a 2-volume dissertation, and so I went and worked with Valerie because of the critical nonfiction, the nonfiction and the critical pieces, and so she was the prose instructor at this conference. So it was a 2-week conference for writers who were putting Catholicism as central to their work, and so I think it was in contemporary literature. So it could have been criticism, because there were some people who were doing criticism. There were some medievalists too. So I think it could have been scholars. Okay. So it's current scholarship on Catholicism in any discipline. Okay. But it had to have a creative writing component because Valerie was there. And I worked with her for the prose, for the nonfiction pieces of that. And so she spoke with me and told me about the Notre Dame Review. I submitted some work. She connected us at that point in time, somehow.
When you say she connected us, what do you mean?
Well, you and I had a dinner or a lunch in San Francisco.
I remember the lunch, but
we had to have been talking, or something in order for that to happen.
But do you remember me asking you for poems for the wind shifts and how that? Do you remember?
I think it may have been from that lunch or maybe after. It's been.
Okay.
We're now in 2023. That's like 20 years ago.
Okay.
It's almost 20
okay.
years
So I do
ago.
remember that lunch in the Mission District.
Yeah.
Pupusas
I remember I was wearing a very nice purple coat
on Mission Street, and. Okay, so it looks like it's fuzzy for both of us.
It is.
Okay. Well, but 2004 was when I was putting the proposal together.
So it had to have been post, because I graduated from the PhD. It must have been that. 2004 was when I was back in San Francisco.
Yeah, I mean 2004 was when I was putting the proposal together.
And I got the
for-
Cabrillo job 2005. I
anthology.
was at UC Santa Cruz 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I remember also. Right. So I asked you for some poems, and then The Wind Shifts came out in 2007.
Okay.
And I remember that my criteria was people with no more than one book in print or less.
Mhm.
So there are a number of poets in there who didn't have a book yet, and
Yeah.
you were in that category.
Yeah.
I do remember that after the anthology came out, I would occasionally hear from you because you were having a difficult time. Oh, yeah, I know also must have happened. Perhaps you began to submit your manuscript to the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize, maybe.
And every single time I did, it was a finalist. Every single time.
I forgot about that piece.
Yeah.
Maybe that might have been part of it as well.
Yeah, so every single time I submitted to the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize, it was a finalist. Every single time.
Yeah, and what that was me
right.
winnowing 70 manuscripts down to 20 or 15.
Right.
And sending it off to the final judge.
Right. And then Francisco Aragón selected mine and Martinez, I think is his last name, as honorable mentions. And
okay, so Francisco Alarcón as the winner, Lori Ann Guerrero.
Yes.
Okay.
And with 2 honorable mentions, and I was one of those.
I do remember,
mentions.
but here's the story I want to share, though, because this will get us to this.
Okay.
The story I want to share is that in those years, I do remember getting emails from you and detecting, that you were really having a difficult time finding a home for that first book manuscript.
So who was the other honorable mention? Do you remember?
No.
Because that's what happened. He published a book. And I emailed you saying, Francisco, he published a book. Why can't I publish a book? What am I doing wrong? And then you told me about Mouthfeel Press.
I told you about Mouthfeel Press?
Yep.
Oh.
You told me about Mouthfeel Press, and I sent it to them, and Maria Maloney, we're still friends.
Yeah.
And we still talk, and this book is she's working on it to get an ebook. Okay. And because she just redid her press.
I was not aware. You're reminding me. I knew Mouthfeel Press existed, but I don't remember sending you to them. Okay, so I'm going to read you my favorite poem from from Split Geography, and then that's going to take us to another direction. And I'll tell you why I've chosen this as the poem. Okay, and the reason why I'm reading the poem and not having you read the poem is because when I was at UC Berkeley in the mid '80s, one of my teachers was Robert Pinsky.
Oh, okay.
And he has his idea, one of the lessons that he always tried to instill in his students was the idea that a poem is not a fully realized work of art until it is uttered aloud by someone other than its author.
Well, thank you.
That's Robert Pinsky. That's why I'm going to read it.
Okay.
It's to do without. To do without. It's not death that matters. It's the time, here, now. I was thinking about a roof, the sky opened by wind, a white moon 3 inches above a horizon of darkness. Love me, goddammit. That's what gets me most. At this moment, no one is thinking of me. It's only me, right? I'm the one who's stuck here. I could get in my car and speed up Oakland Drive, but curving around, it's slow to a stop knowing the police were out and about, willing to give a helpful warning, a ticket to steer straight. Danger is imminent, now that the weather has cooled and snow is coming. Slow down. There are leaves in the street. It's wise to take a few precautions. That's my problem. My family, each of them with their screwed up lives, loved me and loves me. And I can't get over it. Me, the fat little girl who cried too much. Child born out of wedlock. By the time I could remember, it was all over. The family forgave my mother, forgot my father. And I was this little thing with chubby hands to hold. Tío Ernesto taught me how to dance in the garage, where he set up 3 television sets so he could watch football games. Rose Bowl, Orange Bowl, Carnation Bowl, all the games, all the time. I was unaware he was placing bets, but no matter. He held my hands and taught me how to swing. I was shy at first. 1 step here, 1 step there. Shake the hips a little, just like this. Then turn and face the little boys. Aaron, Wesley, Mike and Pete on their bikes, watching me dance on a warm afternoon. My tío knowing they were there. He wanted the world to look at this beautiful little thing. They should love me too. Impossible to forget that. I got over the embarrassment by hiding in the bathroom at Gallatin Elementary for 3 days. But to actually know love, it's something I find difficult to do without. Do I really have to tell about the difficulties? That party, going home alone, driving the quiet road through silver darkness, the trees, the moon, and the sky, open to the expanse. Now, the reason I selected this poem, it feels like an overture of all the work that's going to come next. So speak to me a little bit about the genesis of this poem, if you remember it.
Oh, gosh. Well, I wrote that in Michigan. So the title of the book, Split Geography, is because the poems in the collection are Nicaragua, California, Michigan. So how I was split in my geographies and trying to become whole with all these different locations. So that one was written in Michigan. So that's the snow. And even though Oakland Drive reminds us of Oakland, it was actually, there was an Oakland Drive in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Well, okay, so you start off with all this imagery, but for me, the poem really comes alive where you really realize what's at stake, at least for me, for this reader, when you get to the point where you say, child born out of wedlock. By the time I could remember, it was all over. The family forgave my mother, forgot my father. I mean, that's where the poem really begins to, that's the, and then of course the turn with Tío Ernesto, who you've said earlier was sort of like a father figure.
Yeah.
So it's a poem that sort of takes you on this little journey.
Yeah. Well, it began with the end where I was driving alone. So I was very frustrated in Kalamazoo because I was looking for love and I couldn't find it, and I did find it. I have found love, but I was frustrated many times, and so I started the poem exploring those feelings. Okay. And then part of my trajectory as a writer, or how I approach writing, is you have to dig deep and you have to find your truth, and you have to be brave enough to say it. So if I'm exploring my feelings of why am I seeking love, why am I leaving parties and I'm not chasing after people, right? If they're not going to love me, I'm on the road and I see the empty expanse of the clear Michigan sky. Why am I feeling these things? And so I had to go back into my past and into my family to discover my truth. And so in a poem, when you have to do that work to find your truth, and then it becomes a gift that you give to the reader if you want. And so I've always been willing to give that to the reader.
Okay.
And share those things. Share my truth. I'm willing to do that on the page.
So you got Split Geography out there. You got your first book published. How did this book come about?
Well, actually, they happened at the same time. There was 1 week. I also wrote a book on teaching with 2 other colleagues, and they almost all 3 came out the same week. It was at an AWP conference in Minnesota. I was like, okay, from 0 to 3 books in 1 week. And of course, it did get spaced out a little bit, but they happened at the same time. Twice Told Over was by Unsolicited Press, which is still, they're growing and they're getting very, very good reviews, and people are really loving that press, but they had just started when they took when they took Twice Told Over. So I had I was sending out manuscripts, and Split Geography began as a chapbook. Then I asked Maria if I could expand it to full length, and so she said yes. So then they simultaneously happened at the same time, because I had so this was 2017, and I graduated 2021, 2022. So I had the majority of poems for both of the books by 2015, 2014, and so I kept on redoing Twice Told Over. And so then I had 2 manuscripts because I had been writing for so much and trying to find a publisher. And then they both got published at the same time.
So you mentioned, you just explained to me a little bit what you were getting at with Split Geography. What are you getting at with this title?
Nathaniel Hawthorne has a book, Twice Told Tales. And so part of 18th century American letters is trying to establish the American literary voice. And so I decided to take my Latino heritage and Latin American, Rubén Darío and César Vallejo and Alfonsina Storni, but I also claim American literature as my heritage. And so following with Hawthorne, I was trying to say Latino literature is part of the American literary landscape, Twice Told Over. So telling the stories of family, of past, of literature in different ways 2 times over.
So in other words, if I'm hearing you correctly, are you saying that you feel like you're nourished by 2 traditions?
Yes. Yeah. And so that's why I titled the book that, to anchor it in the United States.
Okay.
Because my work is in the United States. But being in the United States, I'm also Nicaraguan. So that is part of the United States landscape of this duality that we all have, and as we try to formulate a United States identity.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to read a poem and then talk about it.
Okay.
This poem.
Okay. A System of Interpretation. Hermeneutics is definitely not a word my grandmother would have used, as she guided my arm through the sleeve of a sweater, a pink cotton cardigan with lavender rosebuds that I never actually owned or put my arm through. So much is creation, lies, misinterpretation. And so hermeneutics needs to be found in a dictionary, any dictionary. Even the dictionary I won as a prize for a poem in the local paper, a poem about cemeteries growing like sunflowers in the backyards of farmhouses. I think in my attempt to understand hermeneutics, I've mixed exegesis with exodus by confusing my cousin Moises with an ideal promised land with a never-ending itch on my left heel. I'm still holding out for an explanation, a system of interpretation, balancing the various shades of green on a lawn midsummer. I did win a dictionary as a prize for a poem about the Midwestern tractors that mow hayfields into rolls of carpet behind wire mesh fences. But I can't contain what perhaps doesn't exist or flies fast as a raven, a crow, a blackbird sitting on a telephone wire. In my dictionary are many unfamiliar sounding words with Latinate roots. Most of these I can pronounce, as long as breath slithers, as in maleficious, which has to do with evil or wickedness, concepts riding through divorce, good and evil, right and wrong. I identified, attached a label, and controlled my own universe. Dictionaries provide explanations, divisions, lines, and rationales for why one word choice is better than another. But if we pay attention, we might notice there's been a mistake. In the dictionary I won for a poem about the Midwest and rings on dead people's fingers. The M's are spliced in with the N's. It's a factory second. And only by noticing can I properly stand on one foot with the aforementioned dictionary precariously balanced on the top of my head. And the reason I'm laughing is because I know why I wrote this poem. I was in grad school, and there were people standing around having hors d'oeuvres and drinking wine and saying things like, the hermeneutics, la la la, the exegesis, la la la. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And then I'd go back to my room and look these words up and like, what the heck are they talking about? And so that's my joke, that I started laughing. When I found out the definitions of these words, I'm like, why can't they just say it? Why can't they just say a system of interpretation? Right? And then as I continued my graduate studies, this is very problematic because the truth that the university system creates, which is real, is in a convoluted language that the very people who need the truth cannot understand. So these systems of interpretation, these hermeneutics, this exegesis that might free the common person from the bounds of societal injustice, they've never heard of these concepts, and so they continue being trapped. And so through grad school, because I forced myself to learn all these things, and that's why when I was reading the poem, I was mispronouncing these words, because I've only learned them by reading and by hearing them maybe 10 times in spoken conversation. They're not part of my vocabulary, but I completely understand them.
But why did you decide to include it in a poem?
Because I was angry at this. When I realized that all this knowledge was hidden away by these convoluted words, I had to write a poem. That's why the dictionary's on my head. Okay. Because this knowledge needs to be out there in the world, but it's not written in a language that is accessible and communicates. And so I do try in my poems to be precise in my language. And I don't know if people say, oh, her use of language is too simple, but it's not, it's precise. Because I want people to understand my ideas in my poems.
So who's your audience for that poem?
Oh, I have no idea. That's the other problem. Who is my audience? I don't know. Somebody else who's in grad school. You know, I'm not sure. Do I write with an audience in mind? I have to say I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
We're going to wind this down
by
asking you to read this poem, and basically similar to what we just did.
Sure.
But I want you. And this, by the way, just for documentation purposes, this is from your manuscript, A Variation in Blue.
Okay. Yes.
Which is coming out from Red Hen Press.
Yes.
In 2025.
Okay, and so that book, Variation in Blues, every single poem in the collection is in a set. So there's variations of the theme, and the themes vary between each other. And then the idea of blue comes from Rubén Darío and his work, Azul. But also blue as in sadness.
Sure.
So it's all wrapped in together in the variations. So when a poem falls from heaven. When a poem falls from heaven, gallons of milk and loaves of bread expire at the corner market. The past due electric bill slides into the mailbox, and the stainless steel pot from last night's dinner remains on the stove. When a poem falls from heaven, My father and abuelita rise up to the stars in the embers from a burning log, while fish with antennae project light in the deep sea, while pericos perch in rainforest canopies. When a poem falls from heaven, fog on the bay rests like memories of the homeland, plátanos fritos y queso. And yes, sweet is good. I can write on the margins of a loose leaf notebook, pick hermit crabs off the beach in San Juan del Sur, slip a sailboat into a bottle, flip 3 tortillas on a comal. When a poem falls from heaven, words repeat on billboards, in headlines, across cinder block walls. They rise from a cup's broken handle, a window pane's cracked frame, a hand bears shattered glass, and leaves crumble as birds cross sky. When a poem falls from heaven, hombres, mujeres, the gendered knot, speak the world. As my car speeds through a yellow light at the corner of the moon, and waves slide over sand crabs, while flames turn into coal, low and warm on a beach campfire. When a poem falls from heaven, I listen to my mother's phrases, the vowels that cry in her ear. It is necessary to hear her life as she blinks, smiles, turns a ring on her finger. Let us focus on the words from my mother's lips. Mija, ven acá. My mother never kissed me. Will you? Thank you.
Talk to me about the ending of that poem.
Oh, well, so when I read it, I love the ending of that poem. And right now, from our conversation, I realize why that ending is so important to me. It is because my mother is my link to Nicaragua, is my link to Spanish. So having the Spanish is very important. But then also that whole idea, her mother never kissed her, will you? So my mother's looking for love. I'm looking for love. And it all connects.
But the poem, at least that line of the poem, suggests, and you can tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree, it suggests that perhaps the relationship between your mother and her mother wasn't ideal?
Oh, no, it wasn't. Yeah, my mother, my grandmother came to the United States, and so my mother's the last of 8. And then she was left as an infant with her grandmother. And so their relationship was never, they were tied together. My mother loves her mother very, very much, but it was very problematic and antagonistic and created a lot of sadness in my mother.
Okay. So that's what I get.
Yeah. Created a lot of sadness in her.
I mean, it almost suggests, Mija, ven acá, my mother never kissed me, will you? It almost suggests that the mother figure in this poem is seeking something from the daughter that she wasn't getting from the mother. Yeah.
And so one of the beautiful gifts my mom gave me is unconditional love. And I think she loved me the way she wanted her mother to love her.
Okay. Yeah. And it sounds like, as a way to wrap this up, your oeuvre is an exploration of all of that, of your family history, the ups and downs, the disappointments,
Well, so in my graduate studies, I came across Keats, and I really argued against that whole idea that the personal is something that we should not do. And what I came to a conclusion is that we can only understand the world through our own personal history. So my poems are filled with my personal history, with Nicaragua, with Spanish, with my family, with the search for love. But hopefully, at the same time, from the personal, we get to the universal, right? So this desire for love comes from my mother's desire for love, comes from my grandmother's desire for love, from my father's desire for love. And from that personal knowledge, then it's the human desire for love. So my stories or my poems, which are very narrative, they're linked into the personal details of my life, because that is my truth. And from my truth, I'm hoping to create poems that explore all of our journeys through the world. In a non-intellectual, I don't want to be in the head. I want to be in the body. I want to be in the people I love and in the world I know. instead of in my brain. Even though I think I do write a lot of heady poems.
Well, the hermeneutics poem.
Hermeneutics, yeah.
On that note, thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward to letting my students watch it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Francisco. It was such a pleasure to be here and to enjoy this time with you at Notre Dame University. Thank you so much.